What I'm gonna do over the next two videos, well, not the next two, because next video is gonna be Q&A, but over this weekend, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break down the case for why the Browns will be good this year and why they could be bad, right? Because we have to prepare for both, right? As much as I want to be all good, all gas, no brakes, because it's kind of like go forward with all the good stuff. We know that sometimes things can go wrong, right? And Browns fans, we really know that things can go wrong. But today isn't about why things will go wrong. Today isn't about cynicism. It's about moving forward in the right direction. And what is this team doing to move forward in that right direction, and why you can make the case that this Browns team is going to be good. My number one overall point on why this team is going to be good next year is that the team is actually good, right? Look, in the NFL, the difference between 7-10 and 10-7 is like this, right? We can look at Browns games and we can count to 4 or 5 of them, and this is the case for every team. 4 or 5 games always come down to little tiny, small decisions. Or little tiny things that happen. Sometimes it's a referee decision. Sometimes it's a coaching decision. Sometimes it's a player decision. But these small, tiny decisions end up deciding games, and sometimes they go your way. Sometimes they don't. And with the Browns, a lot of their losses were those things. And that's the case for a lot of teams that are where the Browns are, right? We're in that kind of mediocre range where you're at or just below 500. The reason I say this all the time. The reason Pittsburgh has not gone below under 500, despite multiple years of not having Big Ben, despite multiple years of injury-ridden seasons, is because Mike Tomlin, at the end of the day, is competent. And competence wins football games in the NFL. Right. That's the one thing Pittsburgh has going for them, right? Because talent level, teams are all talented, right? Everybody's really talented. Even a team that's not that talented is still very talented in the NFL, and talented enough to win any game that they play in. The problem isn't talent, and especially with this Browns roster where the talent is incredible. The problem was sometimes they weren't competent, and most of the times that was on defense. Right now, Pittsburgh has their moments where they're not competent. Nobody is competent 100% of the time, but Mike Tomlin's been there so long. They have had continuity in that building so long that competence is much easier to come by. The Browns are still trying to build that, right? They're going into is this the fifth year of Kevin Stefanski? No, it's the fourth. We're going into the 4th year of Kevin Stefanski. I don't remember the last time the Browns have went to a 4th year of any coach. So that's a huge step for this franchise, right? They're getting into that 4th year of Kevin Stefanski. So maybe, how things are run. It's interesting when you hear other players talk about other teams, right? When I listen to Mark Ingram talk about how the Ravens do things, he'll say stuff like, hey, the Ravens give you the money in the one check. Or if you hear Ramon Foster talk about how the Steelers do things, he'll talk about, hey, the Steelers, they'll give you a contract like this. This is how things run in Pittsburgh. The Browns don't really have that because we haven't had continuity to build up that reputation with the player base of, okay, this is how Cleveland does things. Now we're starting to get there, right? Because they've had continuity for 4 years. I think once you get to that 6 to 10, 6+ years up until 10, that's when you really get into that zone. But it takes a while, right? Because what you want to do is you don't need the best head coach in the world. You don't need the smartest head coach in the world. You don't need the best GM in the world. You don't need the smartest GM in the world. But what you do need are competent people. I think people overthink this all the time when it comes to management and coaching. You can have the best coach of all time and no players, and your team's going to stink. Right? There might be a floor, but if you have bad players and a great coach, you're not winning a Super Bowl, right? You can have the best coach and on paper the best GM, but players are what makes or breaks your team, right? So If you don't have the players, you really don't have anything. Now, there are teams that achieve a great deal without players, but again, that success is limited. As much as we talk about Pittsburgh and Baltimore being these well-run organizations, they have not been to an AFC championship game recently either. The one team in this division that's been to an AFC championship game and a Super Bowl recently is the Cincinnati Bengals. And you take one look at that roster on the offensive side of the ball and you understand why. Right? Is Zach Taylor the best coach in the North? No. Are the Bengals the most well-structured organization in football? No. But they got Joe Burrow, they got Jamar Chase, they got T. Higgins, they got Tyler Boyd, and they got Joe Mixon. They have a really good team. Players make or break you. Players make or break coaches. Players make or break GMs. And sometimes I feel like we focus so much on the front office and the head coach and we expect them to make or break the team. That's just not the case. Like, that's just not how it appears to work. So instead of focusing on getting the best coach of all time possible or the best GM of all time possible, imagine that there's a bar, right? There's a bar that you want to hit with the GM and the coach. If they pass that bar, then they're fine, right? This is what Pittsburgh has figured out. This is what Baltimore has figured out. This is what Cincinnati has figured out by necessity, right? Like, they have figured out that, hey, we don't have to panic and wonder, do we have the best coach that we could have possible? No, we just need a coach that's above the bar, right? The standard's the standard. Is he above the standard? All right, cool. Let's live with that. And then let's build continuity through that. The Browns' problem has been, okay, we'll find somebody who's bad here, or maybe they have an off season, or maybe they don't feel like they're the best coach every year. And then we get rid of them when in reality, like, look how many times Sean Payton has gone under 500 in his career. Look at how many times Bill Belichick didn't have an over 500 season. He had one over 500 season, in his first 6 years in the NFL. 1 out of 6. 1 out of 6. That's crazy, right? 1 out of 6. And that's Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time. You know, we put all this stuff on coaching when, like, coaching's important, but it's only important to a certain point, right? And right now, I think the Browns coaching staff is competent, especially with the addition of Jim Schwartz. And that's why I think this team is going to be good, because offensively, they should be competent, right? Deshaun Watson, very good quarterback. Kevin Stefanski should be open to changing some of this offense, which he's already signaled that he's going to change a lot of this offense to fit around Deshaun Watson, because you bring in Deshaun Watson to run Deshaun Watson's offense, and Kevin Stefanski can add into that, right? But you didn't really have that time because he was coming in midseason. You're doing a mid-quarterback change, so you kind of had to have him run what the old guy ran. And Jacoby Brissett and Deshaun Watson are two completely different quarterbacks. If you're worried about those last 6 games, I'll explain what I mean more thoroughly. Since we knew that Jacoby Brissett was going to have to play 11 games, the Cleveland Browns knew that Jacoby was going to have to play 11 games, you built the offense that Jacoby Brissett can run in the offseason. And then when Deshaun Watson came back, you tried to throw in some elements that were specific to Deshaun, but the base of that offense was still the offense that Jacoby Brissett can run. And that included some things that might have been limiting or not necessarily a fit for Deshaun Watson. Like, Deshaun goes through his progressions much more quickly than a Jacoby Brissett. Deshaun's going to have a more complicated thought process pre-snap versus a Jacoby Brissett. Deshaun's going to want to try to take more shots than a Jacoby Brissett, right? If you tell Jacoby Brissett, if you see too high shell and you see that they're in zone, I want you to take this shot on your third step of your drop, he has no problem doing that, because he's not somebody who you want to have drop back, look, read the field, and then decide, right? He's somebody, hey, 1 read, go. 2 reads maybe, but 1 read, go. That read ain't there, go here. That's what the plan is with Jacoby Brissett, right? Look here, that ain't here, go here. And then if that's not there, throw the ball out of bounds. With Deshaun Watson, it's very different, because you don't want to go 1 read here and then the one next there, right? With Deshaun, because Deshaun's going to want to read the field, because Deshaun's going to see what he sees. He's going to want to see different coverages, see different sides of the field. He might want to go 1, 2, back to his 1, then hit his 3. That's a much different style of quarterbacking than Jacoby Brissett. And I think that's why he looked so funky. I'll do a film breakdown later in the summer to talk about that in more detail. But That's the kind of difference that you get to make over an offseason when you're like, all right, Deshaun's going to play the whole season. We know what we're going to do with him. We know what we can run. If he gets hurt, we can go back to the old stuff, but we're going to plan for Deshaun and give Deshaun the Deshaun offense. And I think the offense will be much better. The defense will be competent. I don't know if the defense is going to be top 5 because Jim Schwartz hasn't really coached a ton of top 5 defenses throughout his career, but what he has been is competent. What I know is that the floor for this defense isn't going to be as abysmal as it was last year. And as long as they're not abysmal, we should be fine. If they're anything, and look, this is the kind of defensive roster that just competence alone can make a top 5 defense. This is why I had faith in Joe Woods last year, because I thought the roster would save him, but he found a way. Jim Schwartz is not somebody who has proven himself to be incompetent throughout his NFL career. He is actually proven to be very competent, right? Not best of class. He's kind of like a Ford F-150. That's what I would compare Jim Schwartz to. Now, I know that there's going to be like a whole pickup truck war that I'm not aware of, and people are going to get mad that I said Ford F-150, but I know Ford F-150 is the number 1 selling car of all cars, right? And the reason it's the number 1 selling car of all cars is because at the end of the day, it's competent, right? Like, it's not the best pickup truck in the world, or maybe it is. Or maybe you can make some attachments to it to make it the best pickup truck in the world. But you know, with the Ford F-150, that if it breaks down, you know where the parts are. You know that people know how to fix most of these things. You know that you can take it into any garage to get it fixed. And you know that if something goes wrong, it's been around so long, so many people have had it, that there are solutions available that are easy to find. You have been around long enough, right? That's what the Ford F-150's value is. You know you can get one to run for at least 10 years because enough information is out there to help you get there. That's why a lot of people buy them. And they just used to having Ford F-150s. Versus what, like, Joe Woods tried to run like an exotic Italian sports car. You know, Lamborghini. He tried to run a Lamborghini defense here. And Lamborghini defenses look great when they run. But what's the problem with those kind of cars, right? They're not practical. You can't use them every day because they break down a lot. One thing goes wrong in that car, right? You know, it might be something like the windshield wiper doesn't work anymore. And then all of a sudden the whole system of electronics is off. You can't drive the car. That was Joe Woods' defense. Hey, when it worked, it looked beautiful. You know, the handful of times where it was working, the Joe Woods defense looked good. But the problem with it is it took just a little nudge, just a little flick, and then that thing's in the shop for 3 weeks. And that's what Joe Woods' defenses was like. You have switched and towed that fancy Italian sports car out of there, and you're putting the whole defense in the Ford F-150. And I know with the Ford F-150, I might not win the race, but that thing gonna run, right? Like, I don't have to worry about it being in the shop forever. That thing's gonna run. That's what Jim Schwartz is to this defense. That's why I strongly believe he might not be best in class. He might not be what you aspire, right? The defense that you aspire to be, or anything that's going to make anybody jealous, because Ford F-150s are relatively obtainable. Like, there's Raptors and everything else like that are like the high value ones, but you know, they're relatively obtainable cars. And, you know, you're not going to make anybody jealous with no Ford F-150, but you know what? You're going to get to work on time. You're going to be able to do what you got to do, and you're going to be able to handle your business with the Ford F-150. That's what Jim Schwartz is to his defense. He is just reliable. Built for tough. This is not a sponsored video, but that's what he brings. And that's why I feel like if the defense is competent, you paid a lot of money for Deshaun Watson. And one of the things that I felt about Deshaun Watson, even before he was here, even though I had mixed opinions on what some of his numbers, the tape review kind of jumped me on a different direction with him. But with him, he's the kind of guy that doesn't need an offense to carry him. And he's actually better when he's able to work in his own structure. So that's something that Kevin's going to have to adjust there. And I think Kevin's going to make that adjustment. And if not, Deshaun's going to figure it out, right? So there's that. I think the offense is only going to be so bad with the full offseason and the full season of Deshaun Watson. I think the defense can only be but so bad with a competent professional defensive coordinator like Jim Schwartz, right? This Browns team might not be the McLaren we've been trying to build, right? It might not be the 14-2 regular season team. But the reason I believe in this team is you look at the parts, you look at the pieces that are the people who are putting the parts together, and you see, okay, This is going to run, and this is going to win, I would say 10 to 12 games, at least 10 to 12 games. It should win 10 to 12 games because you've gotten all of the exotic pieces out of there. You just have the reliable pieces. And what are the reliable pieces? Myles Garrett's good for double-digit sacks every year. Nick Chubb, good for over 1,000 yards every year. Amari Cooper, good for over 1,000 yards every year. That offensive line, if they stay healthy, they're pretty good every time they're out there. Then you flip sides, and then Denzel Ward is kind of inconsistent. He's kind of a sports car piece, but Greg Newsom's always been solid. Martin Emerson's been pretty solid. You look at Grant Delpit, don't take much to get him going, right? JOK, all of these things, and you go, okay, cool. They're gonna be but so bad, and they might not be the best team in the NFL in the regular season, but they'll be a really good team next year in the regular season. And those are the teams, right, that can get through a playoff push. They're like, you don't want to be the exotic team, right? You don't want to be the McLaren that races to 14-2 and gets that first round bye sometimes, because those things tend to break down in the playoffs. The teams that just make it through in the playoffs all the time are the teams that are built like pickup trucks. And that's what the Browns are kind of built like right now, is they're built like a pickup truck. So that's why I think the Browns will be good in 2023. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night.